I want to go back because I was there for every snap. I saw every snap as a Jet. You come in, you had a good defense, but Rex doesn't nurture quarterbacks. We know that. It's not a shot. We all know that. I've told Rex that to his face. You had a first year, you improved your second year, started improving your third year, and then, Rex is what Rex is. But when was your first moment you had little misgivings about the Jets thing was turning sideways?
I don't think it was till, the end of that third year when I really got a chance to look back, because you got to understand it was Rose Bowl at USC, AFC Championship. So for 3 years, all I knew was essentially postseason football. Right. And then that technically fourth year or third year as a pro, I think because of our success with free agents, you got to understand we played the free agency gamble game hard. Like we rolled the dice a lot and we hit a lot. So we bring in Jason Taylor, we bring in Braylon Edwards, we bring in LaDainian Tomlinson, all these guys that gelled and meshed. Boom. Well, we have to decide what we're doing with Santonio Holmes, another free agent we brought in, and Braylon that third year. We give the money to Santonio. Braylon's gone. Now our receiving core takes a hit. Jericho Cotchery doesn't want to be there because he wants to be a starter. He wants to be a number one somewhere. So he's gone. Then it's, we bring in Plaxico Burress and Derek Mason. And now we're in this position where we got to get used to throwing to each other, or I got to throw to these guys. And, we're not necessarily used to each other or comfortable yet. We got a new coordinator. Things start changing so fast and the variables start changing so fast because we were good at changing variables, throw it in a pot, stir it up, AFC Championship. So let's do it again. And I think we just got, in some ways, a little addicted to that success with the free agency gamble. And it's nobody's fault. People were trying to make the right decisions. And, Mike Tannenbaum and I have talked about this a bunch, but it's just kind of the way it went. And then after that, once you start changing over coaching staff, once, when Rex is there the night before saying, hey, I think we're going to get this great running back or a great receiver in the draft, and then they go draft Geno Smith. I'm like, what are we doing? So obviously he didn't make the pick. And so you got a GM and a coach that aren't necessarily on the same page. And now we're all over the place. So it's hard to develop somebody in an environment like that. But those first couple of years, you're right. Those first 3 years, the trajectory was going in the right direction.
Yeah. And I bring this up because I've said there's 5 first-round quarterbacks. I said, I think 2 will succeed because that's the precedent, the historical precedent. I said Trevor Lawrence and whoever lands with the 49ers. I'm like, because, it's like Lamar Jackson works with Harbaugh. Josh Allen's great because you have Brian Daboll and a really good GM. And so, and I bring it up with you because I really do think unless you're a once in a decade, Elway, Luck, it's so much of it is where you land. We both love Sam Darnold. They went big on free agency. They didn't hit on any of them. And
that was worse than
none.
I'm here complaining, but that was worse than what I experienced. I was like, dang. So but like you said, if you're that generational talent, okay, you're going to outlast maybe some coaching staffs until they land, right? Until it hits. But if you're not, and you can't potentially play well enough to withstand those blows, then you get run out of town. Look at Sam. You get run out of town in 3 years and everybody's like, hey, Sam, I guess nice to know you. Good luck. They don't even know what they had yet.
It's interesting because I do believe the Jets, Joe Douglas. I know Joe. I thought he had a good first year. I think he's really sharp. So I do think Zach has a chance. I have no idea what Robert Saleh is as a coach. I would have never guessed that Tom Coughlin out of Boston College would beat Belichick twice in the Super Bowl. Hell, who knows, right? So I don't know. I do feel, though, I will say this. I do feel like Darnold is getting like hands-on mentors. I do think Sam's going to flourish. I really do in Carolina. I guess your thoughts.
I think we're going to figure out how good he can be, right? I think he's finally going to have the resources there, and they're going to build this thing around him to make him successful. And now whether he's a generational talent, we'll find out. But at least it'll be a fair assessment after a couple years. But that's the thing. I sat down with Steve Young recently, and we talked about this for a while and really beat this thing to death. But I mean, he's told me stories about Trent Dilfer when he finally got to Seattle and it was like the heavens opened up and he's finally in a West Coast system and the thing finally revolves around the quarterback. And you have this epiphany of like, wow, where was this when I was doing all these other travels around the country and not just banging my head against the wall? It's hard for people on the outside to understand, but I think Steve put it brilliantly. He said, quarterbacks don't need to be coddled, but they need to be focused. Like you got to make decisions for the quarterback. And there's a very fine line of making it really comfortable or making it a situation where they can thrive and succeed and where you're challenging them, but also giving them resources. It's like parenting, right? Like you set your kid up for success when you can, like, you know, he can jump over this little hedge or jump up the curb or ride his bike down the hill or whatever. And you kind of challenge them on it, knowing that you're there to catch them if they fall and pick them back up and dust them off. And hey, let's try it again. That's essentially what this thing is. And there's no perfect way to do it. It just has to be quarterback focused.
You like Zach Wilson. I used a quote you used the other day. You said, you know, he plays well in chaos. But Mark, people tend to lean into what they're good at. 2021 is not a gunslinger league. It's not. It's an efficiency league. Do you worry he's a little too much of a gunslinger?
That's my only issue is that I said, whatever coordinator he goes to, when that ball snapped, you might not know where that ball is going. And that makes some coordinators uneasy, right? Or sometimes I think there's opportunities where he can stay on platform, keep his good base, and just step into the throw and let it go. And he'll, you know, kind of jump into it or fade away a little bit because he's gotten so used to doing that. If you don't need it, don't use it. But if you have that trick shot in your, you know, club in your bag, take it out when appropriate. And that's going to be part of the learning curve for him. In addition to the speed of the game and all that kind of stuff, you know, he's coming from the Mountain West. He's going to have a lot to learn. He's going to be in a very different media market. You're going to have to stack all those things. And there's going to be a learning curve for each of those categories, whether it's media, the on the field stuff, the classroom stuff, whatever it is, it's going to be a little different. So my only fear with him was, you know, maybe a little too riverboat gambler when you don't have to be. When it's an easy, just routine grounder to second, and you just flip it to first base, flip it to first base. Don't give me any around the back, you know, through the legs, right. Harlem Globetrotters. Just get the guy out. You know what I'm saying? That's the only criticism. And then, you know, when you look at his film, and it's, you know, it's unfair to these guys. And I was in their shoes, so I get it. But this whole, you know, 3-4 months of this draft process is all just like, okay, what's wrong with them? find the bruise on the apple in the supermarket, like inspect it really well too, you know? And so you're just like, well, the 2019 tape doesn't match up even close to the 2020 tape, right? Like he had the shoulder surgery and he just looks like a completely different player. So you're like, you know, player A, player B, what is that? That's where some people are, but I mean, you got to be comfortable with all that if you're going to draft him. And I think he's one of those kids that's already maximized his potential and will do the same thing moving forward. The only other thing with the Jets, that specific situation, they're drafting at, you know, number 3 or 2 for a reason, right? They were not very good. They were not good. They drafted me at number 5 because they traded up from 16, 17, 15, right in there. Middle of the pack NFL is not bad. You're a couple players, couple plays, couple games away from going to the playoffs, which I realized my first 2 years. So he's going to be in that situation with a lot of young guys. They have a ton of draft capital, but they're all going to have to grow at the same time. And that means you're going to have to hit on all these guys. It's got to look like the Blue Angels, right? All 5 of those planes got to be hitting in stride in some sense, right? And that's hard to get all those guys to grow up at the same time. It's like that little league team that you keep together from 8 years old to high school. By the time they're in high school, they're balling. They don't even need to talk to each other. They don't need to practice. They're ready to go. But is that market a market in which they can let that thing marinate, cook it up, relax, you know, manage expectations until it finally, you know, it's time to pull that thing out of the oven? I don't know. That's one of the toughest things for me because those expectations are awfully high.
Do you think it actually helped you coming from SC to New York, your first New York press conference, the Post, the Times, Newsday, talk radio, Mark Sanchez in New York and talk radio, they're just baking you.
Blasting.
Do you honestly think though, it actually helped I was at SC and not Air Force or, you know, UTEP?
I think part of it, I don't think I could have been more prepared, right? Like there would have been nowhere in the country that would have prepared me better for what I was about to get into. And I still wasn't completely ready. It still took a little bit of time, right? To get, your answers fine tuned, and you say one thing, it gets taken out of context or whatever, or you think you're joking with somebody in the press conference. And then, when it comes out in a headline, you're just like, ooh, that's not as funny as it was yesterday. Like that was stupid. So those kind of things, and he'll figure that out. Part of that's his personality. Just like Sam. I mean, Sam's like the consummate SoCal chill dude, just like even keel. I had a little more personality. I was a little more, smiley, happy, like, hey, this is cool, whatever, let's do it. Let's have fun. Let's banter back and forth. I'm witty. Let's do it. Well, you get burned a couple times by doing stuff like that, and you figure it out quickly. And then your answers become a little bit of autopilot. So some of that he's going to have to learn, but there's great people in that PR department. They're going to help him out. And, he's not going to have to say much those first couple of years. Just let everything on the field take care of itself. And like I said, just trying to manage expectations on the outside is going to be the toughest thing for him to deal with. But I felt I was as prepared as I possibly could have been, and I still had some stuff to learn.
So I'm going to ask you a tough question, because I'm going to ask you to take yourself back to your first Jet start. If I recall, it's Houston. I remember it. I watched
Houston,
it.
Yeah.
Just take me to my audience right now. You're a quarterback. You faced Oregon State. Now you're facing an NFL defensive coordinator. Yeah. Take me to your nerves. Take me to how fast it was. Do you remember thinking
it was,
wow?
Yeah. I'll tell you exactly what happened. When the game ended, it was like a blur because Joe Namath was there. My high school coach surprised me, and he was there. My dad was there on the sidelines, like before the game. There were all these people, and I was like, dang, I was like in a groove here, and you got to like exit your cocoon to go like, talk to these people as a real human, and then lock back into this laser focus. And, of course you're not terrified, but there's just like this anxiety about it. And then this excitement that takes over. And then this like killer instinct that you have to have as a quarterback that just takes over. Right. Well, we went like, I think we were almost 50%, maybe even higher on third down, something ridiculous. Like, I don't think we were that good on third down the rest of the season, but I mean, I'm getting to my third, progression on drive, on third downs. We're converting like 3rd and 13s that we have no business converting. Just crazy stuff is happening. And by the time that game ended, I remember getting back in the locker room, and I take off my cleats and I take off my socks, and I was like, oh my shit, I forgot to tape my ankles. I didn't even remember to tape my ankles. I was so nervous thinking about the game and everything else going on. I didn't even bother to go to the training room and tape my ankles, and I tape my ankles all the time. So that goes to show you where my head was at. I was still getting my whole pregame routine down. Like, you have no idea what's going on. And so that was really funny, because I remember watching some of that tape, and those third downs were just, out of this world. And once you do that, it was almost like you're teaching a kid to fundamentals in basketball, and then he's in a game and he hits a fadeaway 3-pointer, and you're like, what the hell was that? And the worst thing that happened is he made the shot, right? Because now he's thinking like, oh, I got this. I can shoot fadeaway 3-pointers. I can do whatever I want. Instead of, you're like, hey, left foot, right foot, elbow straight, right to the target, all that kind of stuff. So we did that. And now I'm just like, oh, we got these third downs. There's no big deal. 3rd and 15. Come on. Just chuck it in there, and then that ball's going the other way. I'm like, oh, shoot, it doesn't work like that.
Who was the single best? Because you had a lot of quick learning to do after the Jets. The single smartest, best play caller or coordinator you had that you look back and think, God, I wish I could have worked with him from day one.
Well, I think just based on time on task was probably Philly and Coach Kelly. I know there's Philadelphia fans that would kill me for saying that, because they hated him by the end. They wanted to run him out of town. I think some of the management moves weren't, him and Howie Roseman weren't like perfectly on the same page, which tends to happen. But I think because the system was so easy to pick up, that was like, boom. As soon as I got in, I was gone. Like, it was good. We're rolling. But when we get rid of all those playmakers, the Deshaun Jacksons and LaShawn McCoys, and try and bring in a back that's more of a, an I formation under center stretch zone back, and DeMarco Murray, and try and run gun runs with them, it's just not the same. And then we had turnover with Nick Foles and Sam Bradford. So then I play, then don't play, and play, then don't play. That was one of the toughest things, is like, I know the system. I feel good. I could run this tempo stuff better than anybody, in my opinion. And when we're rolling, we just need a little thicker playbook. And we wanted to keep all those players. In my opinion, I thought that would have been like, we were right there. And early in the season,
tell me why.
Go ahead.
Why is Chip? You're the second quarterback who's told me this, Mark. So give me some lexicon. Give me some verbiage. Why is Chip's system so easy?
Yeah. Okay. So, Tripp's right. What would we say? Like 63 scat, Z snag, dagger would just be like trio gator. Like, it's just 2 words. If it was more than 2 words, Chip would get pissed. So it was just like near and far would just tell you if you're on the near hash or far hash. If you're on the far hash, it's 3x1 to the field. If you're on the near hash, it's 2x2. Tight end never changes sides, only the slot receiver. And by the time everybody learned it, anybody could play any position. So if you had 4 wideouts on the field, it's easy, because Gators one way, Seminoles the opposite. Lincoln and Ford are 2. It'd be double right, 62 Sam, zebra shallow cross is just near Lincoln. Like, that was it. And so once you learn, dagger and blade, and I don't know how to describe it. It's so easy, and everything was signaled. So the only person I'd have to communicate to was the running back. And the only reason I'd communicate to the running back was to give him the play faster than he would get it from the signal. So I'd have it in my helmet. So I would just grab him and tell him where to go. Like, just put my hand on his jersey and move him over and say, hey, we're going 40. You got the mesh. Said, huh, boom, and hand him the ball. He doesn't need to know anything else. And so it's great when you get in a groove and a rhythm. I think there's a place for that. But I think we're a little heavy with it, because at a certain point, you get to those critical third downs and you can't run the same play every third down. I mean, defensive coordinators are just too good. So once you stall and go 3 and out and only burn 30 seconds on the clock because you just threw it 3 times, there's literally like fights that almost break out on the sidelines, because the defense gets you the ball back and then you just make them go right back on the field. They're exhausted. And they're like, dude, what's the deal? Like, just run the ball once and give us a little break here, because we're gassed. So it's, I think there's a place for it. I think he was ahead of his time, because all these RPOs, that's all Chip. I mean, that was all Chip. So that kind of stuff, you're essentially a second baseman turning 2. You got to have really quick hands. I talked to Sarkisian about this and why Mac Jones was so good. And he said he's got very quick hands, just like he's turning 2, like a double play. And he also is incredibly accurate on balls that are, the swing passes, the tunnel screens, the quick slants, all that kind of stuff. He's a yard in front of the front number. He never slows those guys down with the football and leaves meat on the bone, essentially prohibits them from getting, yak yards after catch. He's always pushing them into the next window, pushing them forward, keeping their momentum going forward towards the line of scrimmage, away from the defender. That's why he's so deadly. And instead of getting 3 yards or 4 yards, you're 12 yards, move the chains, let's roll. And the defense is just like head spinning. So that's what made those things so good. And so it was definitely ahead of its time.
Do you remember? Let's go back to this. Do you remember Aaron Rodgers in college? Because a lot of fans don't.
Yeah, but he was Jeff Tedford, ball very high. He looks nothing like you see today. He didn't even throw the way he throws today. His first year starting. Remember the year he kicked the ball to Dansby or whoever in Arizona? That was like one of his first years starting. Like, he didn't do what he does with his lower body and upper body, like wringing out a dish rag, this whole like jump, throw, disassociation, upper and lower body. He never did that. Okay. This is something he concocted like these last few years, which is crazy to me. The fact that he's that accurate, like I mess around and do it sometimes just to do it. When you're not playing, that's what you do. You mess around and like in practice, you're throwing 7 onto the defense and they're making you throw to certain guys. So you're like, dude, I need some juice on this ball. I'm going to Aaron Rodgers, like hip flick this thing or whatever he calls it. Boom. And you get some juice on the ball, but to control that thing, sometimes the ball goes in the 7th row. I'm like, how the hell does this guy do this? So, and you would never bring up a kid to, sorry, we're on a tangent here, but you would never teach a kid at like a young age, like, okay, Johnny, here's your ball at 5 years old. Let me see you throw it like Aaron Rodgers. Good luck. That ball's going to be all over the yard. You're going to be playing chase, not catch. So it's like what he's been able to do is next level.
It's interesting, Mark. McVay comes into the league, Sean McVay, and he says, no, I'm not going to have any of my good players play in preseason. None. And people said, can't do that.
Yeah.
Goes 8-0.
I know.
And the whole league goes, oh God, preseason's a big con. You left about 4 or 5 years ago. Sometimes I think to myself, I think it's an easier league now. I really do. I think the hitting's way down at practice.
Oh, way down
from your rookie year.
I mean, even from, this would be like 2 CBAs ago, I guess. But my first 2 years were the older CBA where you'd have double days, full pads. I thought about that like my last couple years. I don't know if I could have done that. I don't know if somebody told me right now, give me 2 weeks or almost 20 days rather of 2 days full pads. Like, I'm like, dude, my arm would just fall off. I don't know how I did it before. I was, 21, 22 years old. And like, who cares? You go walk out to the field, touch your toes and just start going. Like, how hard is it? And by the end of my career, I was like, God, and Rex was trying to throw us a bone. Every 4th practice was a special teams practice, essentially. So he'd give the skill guys a break. But it was, that's just insanity now compared to what's going on. Now it's like a virtual off season.
Go back and just give me a sense of how I was at those USC home games. What was it like to be the quarterback of that program?
It's incredible. It was such a ride. And I think Coach Sarkisian had us in such a great mode of focus and reminded us who played before us. We wore yellow jerseys at practice, and he reminded us that you wear yellow jerseys 24/7. Like, you're now the quarterback of USC. That's a big deal. And you represent a lot of people, your family, your high school coach, the school, this program, the guys who played before you, all that. The guys in this room, that's Liner, like Carson Palmer, that was a big, big deal. But around town, it was incredible because maybe it's not, small town USA where everything stops for USC football, but it was pretty damn close, right? Like pretty close. And when you get celebrities fighting to get on your sideline, something's going right. Like, Pete's recruiting his ass off to a point where we were taking recruits just so we didn't play against them. Like, that's crazy to me. It's like, don't go across town because we're better and we don't want to have to play against you. Boom. Now we have a 6th running back in one class. And we're like,
I remember that.
Right? Like, what are we doing? But I remember beating Ohio State in the Coliseum. And that was one of the biggest games of the year. And we all go out. Boom. Somebody has this great idea to go to Hollywood. I'm like, what are we going to do? Boom. We're just out next to Sean Merriman, next to other NFL players from San Diego who came up to LA. We're just like, this is crazy. Like, what are we doing here? It was like next level, and then it just became like what it was. And Carson, Troy Polamalu, those guys built that, right? With Pete, with Norm Chow, and then Sark took it over with Kiffin, and Pete was still there, rocking. It was, there was nothing better. It's like, it did have a little bit of that small town feel, like I said, but in LA, in an awesome market, great weather, a little more relaxed fan base, right? Like, they're not just like breathing down your neck. They were fired up for you, and it was an incredible ride, man. That wearing that yellow jersey was really special.
It's funny. Pete wasn't happy when you left. I remember that weird press conference. It
was weird.
I'm like, it was odd.
He's not wrong. He was talking about quarterbacks in general leaving early. The success rate is low. And then it's okay, define success, right? Like, what does that mean? Win a game, win 10 games, go to a playoff game. What does that mean? Be a 10-time Super Bowl appearance like Tom Brady? Is that success? So it's all relative. But he was basically voicing his opinion. And in that moment, I understand why he wanted to say that. He's like, hey, here's what I feel about the matter. Mark's going to do this and we're going to support him. But usually people don't say what they feel like. They only say like, hey, whatever organization takes him, it's getting a great guy. And look at Matt Stafford, look at Reggie Bush, look at all these guys. So when he gave his opinion, it was just like, wait, what? It was like, hey, listen, we agree to disagree. And I wish him all the best. He's a great kid. So he wasn't like slamming me, but it just was really awkward.
Did you have to go into his office to tell him like an hour before?
No, we stayed up till like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, eating In-N-Out burger the night before this press conference in my apartment. So I knew what he was going to say. That's why I didn't care. I understood. And we were talking about him back at UOP. We were talking about, he told me some great stories about coaches and players. And the whole time we'd get back to, all right, so are you leaving or are you staying? Like, can I get you here? What are we doing? And I was just like, Coach, it's just the right time. Like, Bradford's staying, Colt McCoy's staying. The only other guy that's leaving is Stafford and maybe the kid from Kansas State, Josh Freeman. Like, why wouldn't I go? My stock can never be higher. Like, this is the time. And you're telling me I get to go out in a t-shirt and shorts and compete against these guys and try and become a top 5 pick? I'm in. I'll bet on myself. And he just, we just disagreed. He wanted me back and I respected that. But I'm literally till 2 a.m. the night before the press conference. So it's not like when it all came out and as awkward as it looked, because the Times put us in that picture where we're like kind of crossing paths, like we had already like handshake, hug thing, and then we were passing each other. So he was kind of like here and I'm here, and it was just awkward. And that picture became like, ooh, Pete Carroll, Mark Sanchez. And then he called me that day and was just like, oh my God, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean it to be like this. And blah. I was like, Coach, what are you apologizing for? I get it. It's all good. It's taken on a life of its own. It's all good.